to the 45th Annual Philadelphia Museum of Art Craft Show, and welcome to today's Artist Talk featuring metal artist Ben Caldwell. Ben is a seasoned artist who has worked extensively in painting and sculpture, but has made metal his medium. After growing up in Nashville, he primarily worked and studied art in the Boston area, both at Tufts University and at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. He also studied with the prominent metal artist, Terry Talley. Since then, he has received many awards for his exquisite work. Today, we are lucky and excited that Ben will lead us into his studio virtually so that we can see how and where he creates his beautiful and functional copper, silver, and enamel work. Thank you, Ben, for sharing your art with us.
Sure, thank you. And thanks to the Philadelphia Museum. I'm so excited. I love doing this show every year. I love Philadelphia. And I'm a Tennessee boy, but I lived up in the Northeast for a long time and I love it up there, especially in the fall. It's going to be great. I'm going to show you around my studio and I'm going to show you how I make a ladle. So why don't you come on this way? Here's some of my enamels. This is some of my work. This is powdered glass fired onto copper. I'm kind of known for my flags. I've made one for Dolly Parton. I've made one for a couple of for a couple of governors of Tennessee. I've done all that. Here's kind of the open area here. You know, you can see my trays. I do candelabra. I do silver over here, silver trays, silver bowls, all of that kind of stuff. And so here, you can come over here. I do salad sets. But what we're going to be making is a ladle today. This is one that's been silver plated. And so I'm also going to be showing you some of my antlers. I also make things with antler. And so, but I do all kinds of serving utensils. My father was a collector of antique silver and collected a lot of, you know, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, and Southern silver, as well as English silver. And so I kind of grew up around that. He knew silversmith Terry Talley, who trained me. And I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. And so why don't you come on over here and we'll get to the making of things. And so we like to keep my door open here. You can see outside the back of my studio, beautiful Tennessee fall day happening here. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be, first, I'm going to do this kind of like you do the cooking shows. You don't have to watch me hit a piece of copper thousands of times. It's about as interesting as watching a cake bake. So I'm going to do it in stages. So basically how my ladles start is they start out as a flat sheet of copper. Okay, it is hand cut out. The edges have to be smoothed down. And then I start hammering it. So why don't you come on over here and I'll start the hammering process. These are all my tools that I use. These are stumps, tree stumps. And I carve all these holes myself. I use very primitive tools. Nothing fancy, no dies, no presses, no CNC machines, nothing like that. So I'm going to start by hammering this in. I hammer this and I hammer this and I hammer this. So I'm going to end up with a shape like this. And so this is, after it's done hammering, I go to smaller and smaller radiuses until I get the right shape. Each one's going to be a little different since it's all done by hand. At this point, you can see it's kind of bumpy, okay, or warty, having warts. And so what you do is traditionally, what you do is you call planish. The root word is to plane or make flat. You do that by taking this. Again, this is a simple thing. This is an old-fashioned cobbler's hammer that I've converted into a planishing hammer. And so I make this flat by hammering on it. And this is an old bolt that I've ground down and stuck into another stump. And you pinch the copper between the stake and the hammer. So you can see those little hammer marks there. Now what that's doing is it's smoothing out the copper. It's rising up the low spots and lowering down the high spots so that they're all on the same plane. The process is not used today in modern metal manufacturing. You simply put it on a mold, you press it, you do whatever, but when you're doing it by hand, this is how you hand smooth it. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next step, which is this. This is a finished one. Now this is a bowl that has been fully planished and edged and all of that. So what we do is at this point, I'm going to show you how I make my handles. And so this is, of course, hit, really hundreds or even thousands of times in order to make just this small piece. And it's very time consuming, but I'm not going to do that. So in making of the handles, it starts out as this, a raw piece of 4-gauge grounding wire. Okay, it then gets, I turn it into this, but it's all one piece of metal. Okay, I have to roll it through a rolling press up, and I taper it from that thick gauge down to this thinner gauge. And that's a whole process unto itself, sanding it, and then it has to be heated or annealed, and then it has to be cleaned up just to get it to this stage. So there's a lot of work between here and here. But this is the stage in which I can then twist it into what I call my vine handles. And I'll show you. I do that over here. This is a little bending jig that I've made. It's a very simple lever, 2 points. So I take this. Why don't you come over and sort of look down on it if you can. And so they can sort of see the process. So I slowly bend this. Now I've done this thousands of times, and so I make it look easy, but this is actually a very difficult process. I've got muscle memory. I can do it practically with my eyes closed. Okay, back, and that straight. So we're getting it down like that. Okay, then I start the twisting. Now this copper has been softened so that it will bend easily in the wrap. So I turn it this way. Okay, like that. And I cut the excess off. I use the excess on other longer handles, but I do that. And again, so then what I do is I'll hammer out the, this is lots and lots of hammering. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I have to hammer this whole thing out. I have to hammer this out. I have to put a flat end on it. Then put a flat end here. I punch holes. It then gets drilled. It then gets buffed in the buffing room and becomes shiny. And then it's ready for the riveting part. So here is a finished handle here. It's sort of a classic ladle curve. Then this gets joined to this. like that. And we do that through a process of riveting. So I'm going to do that. There's a little bit of drilling involved. So here is my drill, and I'm going to do it over here on this. So I've drilled that. I have this. Do a brief. This has already been drilled. So I always clean it out. So you can see it's got the holes drilled there. It gets 3 rivets. Then I use brass rivets. And they're solid brass rivets, and they look like very small brass nails, is what they are. I then take this and I put it in the first hole, which is pre-drilled. Get it started. Place it onto here and into the top hole there. Then the nail gets cut. I place it over the same stake I used before. Flatten it out. That out. Then I have to line it up so that it isn't crooked. Okay. Drill a second hole. Using the holes already in there to do it. Do the second rivet right here. We do a third one, just for good measure. 2 rivets will do it, but I always overbuild it. I know I've done this thing in just what appears to be just a few minutes before your eyes, but this takes many hours worth of work and probably at least 30 different steps using a bunch of different tools that I have, for the sake of time, not gone into. And we have the last rivet here. Now, all of these my pieces, they will last many generations. So then I do a final shape, making sure everything is straight and good. And then we have a ladle. And so this is how I make these things. And so this is done in a very traditional manner. And again, you can see the tools that I built this with, very primitive. I don't use a lot of sophisticated things. I make things by hand. That's just the way I like to do things. And all modern silverware, even the fine silverware, is all made by machine, rolling presses, things like that. And I just grew up with old silverware. That's what I grew up with. And when I hold one of my pieces, I want it to feel like it's 300 years old, you know, because they used to make them all by hand. This is the processes that were used back in the colonies and back in England, you know, a couple centuries ago. And so that's because there's nothing like a handmade piece. And I choose to do it this way because I love it. And I've been very blessed to have many wonderful people own my pieces, and I really look forward to coming up to Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Museum. I love going to all the museums around the town. My booth is
717.
717. Thank you, Paige. And so come and see me. I'd be happy to talk to anybody. And so I just look forward to seeing you all at the show.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was fascinating. I can't wait to hear more when I see you in person. Do we have time for one quick question?
Sure, absolutely.
Just wondering about how all your experience in other art disciplines influence your metalwork.
Well, that's a good point. I started out as a painting major in Boston. So I learned classical and modern painting. There, you know, you learn the basics of art about composition, line, form, texture, leading up the eye, things like that. And I use a lot of that now. So when I make a piece of metalwork, I use the same thing. It's composition, it's balance, it's design, it's line, it's form, it's texture. It's light and dark, it's contrast, it's leading the eye. All of those things I still use to this day. And then also I spent about 10 years building musical instruments, which is a whole other thing in itself. Worked at Gibson Guitars, Slingerland Drum Company, things like that. Made instruments for very famous people. It was lots of fun. But I decided to go into metalwork. But as an instrument maker, I learned a great deal of refinement in my craftsmanship. To build a musical instrument, you have to be very, very precise, and you have to be the finish on it is very important, and things like that. And I use that level of precision in making this work as well, that I'm very precise about the way that I do it. And my work looks a little free, but there's actually a lot of precision that goes into that. I like it to look like it just sort of happened, but there's actually a lot of precision in making these designs.
Wonderful. Thank you again. And thank you to all of you who are attending this. We look forward to seeing you at Ben's booth, number 717, at the Philadelphia Museum of Art Craft Show, 45th annual show. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.